With Daring Faith, Chapter 10, India at Last. Amy's neuralgia finally put her to bed for a long time. In the spring of that year, 1894, she was so sick that the doctor advised her to leave Japan. "The climate here isn't good for you," he decided. Many friends from back home wrote letters trying to persuade Amy to return to England, but since she had been in Japan only a little over a year, the stubborn Irish woman felt reluctant to leave the mission field so soon. The doctor advised Amy to go to China for a while to recover, which she did, fully expecting to return to Japan in only a few weeks. But the Lord led in a different direction. She spent several months ministering on the island of Ceylon near India, all the while struggling with the advice from friends all around her who kept saying, "You need to go back to England for the sake of your health." But it wasn't until she got a message that the DOM had suffered a stroke that she finally did return to his home. While Amy was in England spending time with her slowly recovering DOM, she received a letter from a friend. This woman, who had heard of Amy's physical troubles in Japan, worked in South India. "The climate here is just delightful," she wrote. "I'm sure that it would even be good for you, dear Amy. And since India is under British control, there are many English missionaries and other things that will remind you of home. Please consider coming to Bangalore, even for just a short time. I'm sure you could have a tremendous ministry here." "Amy," Mother said one night when she was visiting with her daughter, "this sounds as if it may be where the Lord wants you." "No, I don't think so, Mother," Amy answered, a little stubbornly. "It sounds far too easy for me." The DOM raised himself up from the bed. "Don't be foolish, child," he said. "The climate is such that you wouldn't have to go to bed with a raging fever every other week. That means you could spend more time among the people winning them to the Lord. Does that mean that the Lord doesn't want you there?" Amy looked chagrined at her hasty words. "Of course I hadn't prayed over the matter at all when I answered you," she apologized. "Maybe the Lord really does want me there." As it turned out, no doctor would approve Amy for return to Japan anyway, so after much prayer, she decided to request from the mission board that she be allowed to go to Bangalore, South India, instead. Unrolling a blue banner that showed on it the words that had become her motto, "Nothing too precious for Jesus," she spoke before a group of them. They gave their approval that night. Amy was able to celebrate the DOM's 70th birthday with him, but it was the last birthday of his that she would ever see. On October 11th, 1895, she bade farewell to her family and to the dear old man, and set sail for a country that she had never seen. Little did she know it then, but she was to spend the rest of her life there, over 55 years. Amy arrived in Bangalore about a month after she had left England. She had a raging fever. Dengue or bone break fever, as it's called, usually also causes depression, and Amy was no exception. For days she sat or lay in her room at the mission compound. Even when she was feeling fairly well physically, she felt terribly depressed. One afternoon, Amy lay gazing at the calendar. It was December 16th, her 28th birthday, but of course no one at the mission compound knew that. The other missionaries were kind, but none of them, at least not so far, had become a personal friend to Amy as Misaki-san had been. "I don't know anyone here," she sighed to herself. "I'm just a burden to them. I'm sure they wish I would go back to England or maybe die." She rubbed her forehead. "Lord," she sobbed, "this is so different from 2 years ago. Do you remember that, Lord? My birthday 2 years ago. That was the day in Haros when you gave me 4 souls. What a happy birthday that was. But this one is just miserable, Father. Do you really want me here at all?" It seemed then that even the Lord wouldn't answer her. Amy sighed loudly and gazed out the window. The land was hot, dry, and dusty. Amy sighed again as she thought what Japan would be like at this time of year, the lovely white snow falling and crystallizing the trees, the great Mount Fuji standing guard on the horizon. Somehow she forgot how that same winter weather had made her nerves ache so. Here, where the thermometer never fell below 65 degrees, her birthday seemed a stranger to her. Still, the land of India had a certain kind of exotic charm. It was different from Japan, of course, but was still lovely in its own way. Although she couldn't see any mountains on the horizon, as she had in Japan, she knew from map studies that the mountains were out there somewhere. Stories of thieves that liked to hide in those hills and waylay travelers had made her spine tingle, but she had also heard that those same hills were the ideal place for weary missionaries to cool off in the summer months when the heat became unbearable. What she did see on the horizon was an endless row of mango and tamarind trees, half hiding the hut-like houses of the city. And closer to her window ran a well-traveled road. This was what held her attention, not the road itself, really. It was as colorless as the rest of the land, but the people traveling on it. As Amy gazed, she saw snatches of scarlet, pink, purple, gold, and pristine white flash by her. Maybe it was because of their land had so little color, but the people of India valued color in all their clothing and all over their houses, in their shops and in their temples. Well, we'll see. If the Lord will just help me to get over my depression, I'll trust Him to show me whether or not He really does want me in India at all. Amy did finally recover from the illness as well as the depression that the illness caused. Soon she was back to her old self. Even though she had to spend almost all of her time studying the complicated Tamil language, she still managed to have some time for fun. And when she had her fun, she tried not to let the stiffness of some of the missionaries discourage her. In fact, when she got a pony, she decided to race with a carriage that belonged to the representative of the Queen of England. "You say you are 28 years old, do you?" sniffed a missionary woman. "You act like a child, racing that pony through the streets." "But I didn't mean to do anything wrong," Amy hurried to explain. "It's just that after getting over that dreadful fever and being cooped up in my room for so long, it feels so lovely to be able to— It's utterly childish, that's what it is." The woman ignored everything Amy had said. "If you want to know how to behave like a true lady, I could give you lessons in that." Amy's Irish temper flared up in a moment. She wanted to burst out. "You stuffy old woman! You probably never had a day of fun in your life. If being a true lady means being like you, I hope I never become one." But the words never left her mouth. A voice spoke to her heart so clearly that it was as if someone were standing by her side. But she knew that the voice came from inside her heart. "See, in this, a chance to die," it said. Amy struggled for a moment more with the pride inside her that longed to leap out. Finally she said meekly, "Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry." "See to it that you don't let it happen again, young lady. Racing with the Queen's ambassador like that could be a bad testimony." Amy bit her lip and excused herself to her room, where she burst into tears. Finally she controlled herself and whispered, "Yes, she's right. I don't know enough about India to know but that racing with the Queen's ambassador just might be a bad testimony." Then she giggled, but it was a lot of fun. Amy struggled to be the kind of young missionary that would be acceptable to her elders at Bangalore, but she felt discouraged at not getting to know more about the people she was supposed to be here to minister to. There were so many British missionaries here that she didn't feel as needed as she had in Japan. The older ones did the missionary work, she just had to study her Tamil grammar. One night, as the missionary ladies were all sitting around sedately sewing, one of them casually asked, "Does anyone here know of any Indian Christians that will work without getting paid?" The room was silent for a moment, as Amy waited expectantly for an answer. Finally one said, "I must confess that I can't think of one." "Well, you know what they say," another woman said with a chuckle. The others laughed and all fell silent. They all must have known what it was that they say. Amy, though, was burning with curiosity. "No, I don't," she said. "Don't what, child?" "I don't know what they say. What is it?" "Oh, it's an old Indian saying, 'Say money and a corpse will open its mouth.'" The speaker made such a funny expression when she spoke that everyone laughed again. "I know that's true of most of the Indian people. The street sellers always hold their palms up for you to put money in them. But surely that isn't true of Christian Indians," Amy protested. "Oh, but it is, and unfortunately there doesn't seem to be any way to change it. Not that we mind paying them, you know. It's just that so many of them want more than we can afford to give. It seems that they'd rather not work at all than work for less than they think they deserve," the woman sighed. "It's funny," one woman put it. "An Indian who wants to achieve holiness can have the determination to sit with his palms clenched until his fingernails grow out the backs of his hands. But the average Indian won't do a thing unless he'll know he'll be paid handsomely for it." As the women began to talk of other things, Amy said no more. But she did a lot of thinking. Could it be that the reason the Indian Christians weren't more spiritually minded was that the missionaries weren't praying for them as they should have been? Since she was one of the youngest members of the group, Amy felt out of place asking such a question out loud. But she asked it in her heart again and again that night. "Please, Lord," she prayed, "when you give me Indians to work with me, Let them not put anything before you.